Stream audio check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Shutsky. I'm a political reporter with KJZZ, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of the event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. All registered voters can vote in the general election, which will be held on November 5th. The voter registration deadline is October 7th, and early voting begins on October 9th. Voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by email at debates@kc-a.com, by text at 408-840-8350, or by phone at 480-937-1253. We may not get to all of the audience questions, but we'll do our best. Tonight, we'll be hearing from Republican candidates in Legislative District 22, which covers parts of the West Valley, including Tolleson and parts of Glendale. The Democratic candidates chose not to participate in the debate, which will end at about 7 p.m. After that, we'll move on to our second debate of the night for Legislative District 18. Candidates, you will each have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue. If you feel the need to respond to any other candidate's comments after they conclude speaking, you may do so. I may limit the responses for time management, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. Tonight, we have a candidate running for the state Senate where voters can elect one person, and that is Republican Steve Robinson. Democrat Ava Diaz is not participating in the debate. In the House, voters get to vote for two candidates. Your candidates participating tonight are Republicans Blaine Griffin and Diana Jones. Democrats Elda Luna Najera and Lupe Hernandez are not participating. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, starting for the opening comments. Closing comments will go in reverse order. So, Mr. Griffin, will you start the opening remarks, please?
Sure. Hi, my name is Blaine Griffin. I go by BJ as well. I represent what I will be applying to represent as a candidate, District 22, state representative. I'm not a native from the Valley of the Sun, but I'm actually a child of the Valley of the Sun by way of adoption, and I love it here.
All right, thank you. And then we'll go to Ms. Jones.
Hi. I got into Arizona back in 2013. I got involved in the local politics in 2016, working at the precinct level election sites. And I am looking forward to representing our community. Like I said, I've lived in there since 2013, and I haven't even seen any of our previous electors in our area. So we're hoping to change that and be out in amongst our community and talk with the people to find out what they are really wanting the House to do.
All right, thank you. And for our last opening statement, we'll go to Mr. Robinson.
How you doing? My name is Steve Robinson. I am actually born here in Phoenix, and I was born at the Indian Hospital downtown, so I guess I'm a part native. And lived most of my life here. I love my district, LD22, and I really look forward to representing the people's best interests.
Thank you. All right, so the first question that I have for you is for a topic that is top of mind for voters in districts basically across the state, and that's housing affordability, which has become a top issue as homes and rental prices continue to skyrocket. So we've seen some solutions come to the Capitol, some have passed, some haven't. What I would like to know is, what is your plan for improving housing affordability? What kind of legislation would you like to see passed at the Capitol if voters elect you to go down there? And we'll start with you, Mr. Robinson.
You know, I see apartments going up everywhere in our district and throughout the valley. And so I feel like it's not necessarily a housing shortage. I think it has a lot to do with the economy right now. And one of the best things we can do as a legislature is to help improve the laws that will help improve the economy here locally for our citizens and for our state. LD22 is a district that really suffers from poor economy. We have a lot of people that are living under the poverty rate, and We need better laws that are going to help improve the ability to have a better economy. There's only so much the state legislature can actually do, though, in reference to that. But that's something that I look forward to having an opportunity to help with.
Thank you. And same question to you, Ms. Jones. What would you like to do to improve, to address the housing affordability crisis?
Well, right now, the big thing I see is over near my place, they're building all those little fenced in communities with those 2-bedroom bungalows that you can only lease, that have no property line. Basically, you're living on top of your neighbor. Plus, in my area, they've also built a housing area, but the houses aren't for sale. You can only lease them. So there are houses being built, but they're not getting sold. They're being owned by big conglomerates and being leased out.
Okay, thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Griffin.
What I think is going on here is typical basic plan of the Great Reset, where you will own nothing but be happy. What we would like to do is bring back competitive pricing to the housing as far as the rental stability, because it appears that most of the houses that's being built are the apartments. They're only for rental, and they're being rented by the big hedge funds like BlackRock and et cetera. So they have almost a monopoly on the rental, as well as most apartment complexes are not competing for rent. What they're doing is using a particular set schedule, and then they're all using the same schedule. That's why you see that all the pricings is aligned, and it shouldn't be. If I came in as an investor, I would want to be able to make the house affordable for the particular people in my community, not have to go based on a set rate that everybody has to use from an application.
Right. Thank you. And kind of sticking with the economy, the effect on people's lives. Mr. Robinson had mentioned helping residents make more money, improve the economy. So I want to talk about tax policy for a second. According to a survey by Clean Elections, taxes are a primary concern for voters. So do you think Arizona's current tax policies need to be changed, or are you happy with where they're at right now? We'll go back to you, Mr. Griffin, to start with that one.
I think I'm for less taxes, so I think they always should be changed, and they should be changed to benefit the actual taxpayer. And we should be able to go through all the tax brackets and all the statutes that are on the books right now, see which ones are more beneficial to the constituents that I will represent, as well as the ones that are just punitive. And once we get a hold of that, I think there can be some changes. There's always room for changes in taxation. Actually, I'm for minimal taxation. So, of course, there should be some changes.
All right. And Ms. Jones, to you.
Well, the budget would need to be gone through line by line and cut out a lot of pork and a lot of overinflated money that some of these places are getting from the tax dollars. Because if people pay less taxes, they have more spendable income, which means more money flowing into our economy.
All right, thank you. And lastly, we'll go to you, Mr. Robinson, for an answer on the tax question.
Yes, honestly, I concur with a lot of what Mr. Griffin said. I think lower taxes are better for the people. The taxpayers themselves work hard for their money, and to have the government take a large chunk of that and then proceed to be wasteful with it and inefficient with how they spend that money it's not a benefit to the people themselves. I think the better benefit to the people is to let them have more money in their pockets so that they can spend that money into the local economy, which will help everyone in the long run here locally.
Thank you. And I want to follow up on something that Ms. Jones mentioned. There would have to be budget cuts if we already have one of the lowest income tax rates in the country here. And so there would need to be budget cuts. If we were to cut that further, where would you like to see, where do you think those cuts should happen? And Ms. Jones, we'll go to you since you brought up that point.
Well, I know when I was back watching one of the other debates by somebody from the other party, all they wanted to do was cut the ESA money and put it towards public schools. But doing research, and Mr. Blaine and stuff it's been found that ESA only costing $7,500, whereas public schools getting $14,000. And so I think money should follow the student so the student can get to the school that suits them. My personal experience is my daughter was failing public school. Freshman year, she failed 5 out of 8 classes. I got her into a school that worked for her. She made up all her missing credits. She graduated out of her junior year. She had been co-enrolled at the junior college and had her associate's degree 3 months later and was in ASU as a junior at the age of 17. She was bored in public school. They teach to the lowest level, and she was totally bored. So that's why she was failing everything. They could not teach at her level that she needed.
Okay. So would like to see some of that money come from the public school budget? Is that what the answer I'm hearing?
I think the public school money needs to follow the student to whatever school that student's going to do the best in.
Got it. And then going back to the tax question, we'll go to you, Mr. Griffin. Where would you like to see those cuts in the budget to accommodate further tax cuts?
I would like the tax budgets to go on some of those social construct projects, any DEI projects that they're trying to push, or any of these things where they're trying to force teachers to hire to learn racial divisive structures and curriculums that really have no place in a unified state like Arizona. I think if we get rid of some of those divisive things in those programs, then we'll be able to focus on the actual education of the child and have a curriculum that's to benefit the child, not something that's common core.
Mr. Robinson, where would you like to see?
I think there is a plethora of things that the government spends money on in their budget lines that we need to go through and pick apart and see what is exactly being wasted and where is it being wasted at. I'd like to actually sit down with a report if I am elected and go through each item and look and see what is benefiting the people of Arizona and what is wasteful, what is not benefiting anyone, and what is not moving things forward for our economy and for the betterment of the citizens in our state.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to move on now to another top of mind issue for every Arizona resident, which is our water supply. Our water supply from the Colorado River has been curtailed in recent years. I'm wondering, where do you think Arizona could find more water? What type of legislation would you like to entertain to help either augment or conserve Arizona's water supply? And we'll start with you, Ms. Jones.
Water supply.
Are you starting with me?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, ma'am.
I've heard
Yes.
different things. I've heard some people say we have 100-year water level that they want the real estate folks to keep track of when they want to build housing and stuff. But then I've also heard other people say that we actually have a 500-year water level under our state. But either way, we do have some water, but we do have to conserve it. But we also need to stop letting Southern California steal water from us, since it flows through us first. And when I did live in California, Southern California kept wanting to steal water from Northern California. So it's like Southern California seems to want to soak up everything they can. So we have to find a nice medium ground where we can compromise on this stuff.
All right, same question to you, Mr. Robinson. What are some ideas you would have for either augmenting or conserving the state's water supply?
So honestly, I mean, there's so many different things that you could actually discuss on this topic, but I think overall we could conserve as much as possible, and that will help to some degree. But ultimately, the water supply itself is where the real issue is. And like Diana was just saying, California is taking more and more, and we have local elected representatives that are selling off water from Arizona to California more and shorting Arizona citizens of water that we preciously need. And so I think maybe, I don't know if we can work across state lines and help uh, try to get California to start pushing forward with some more desalination techniques. I do know that the technology is there and it's a lot cheaper than it's ever been to do, and it would probably be very beneficial for them to start investing money into desalination so that they don't have to worry about water going forward, and we can start keeping more of the water that is naturally flowing into our state for us and for our state.
Same question to you, Mr. Griffin.
What I would do is probably try to rectify the problem of water usage. And I would like to try to put different type of restrictions on water being sold or land being sold to foreign countries, and then they're using up all our water and then shipping the product back to their country, in which we're not benefiting from it. So if we're not getting a benefit from any of their usage, from any of their farming, from anything that the water, then I don't think that they should have an unlimited supply of water just by way of purchasing. So I would try to conserve that, as well as just monitor all the water that's being diverted to all these other communities so we can save our own water here, because we should have a sure water supply no matter what. But there has to be some water, since there's a lot of building, and most developers have to present some type of sure water supply when developing. So with all this development, there's some water somewhere.
All right, thank you. All right, now I'm going to move on to elections. I'm going to ask you one question that's a yes or no, and I understand it's not an easy yes or no, so we will get into it deeper, and I will allow you all to further respond. But first, I'd just like a yes or no on this one. Do you agree that President Joe Biden won the 2020 election in Arizona, and that Governor Katie Hobbs won her election in 2022? And I'll go with you, Mr. Griffin.
No.
And Ms. Jones?
Not off the top, I do not think so.
Okay. And then Mr. Robinson?
No.
And then the follow-up to that, I'll let you get in a little deeper, is why then are the many legal cases that have challenged this and gone before judges of both political parties, why have those not been successful in proving widespread fraud affected the election? And so we'll go in the same order. I'll go back to you, Mr. Griffin.
Well, for one, it appears that there's fear, if not there's favor. We need some jurists and some judges with some guts and some gumptions to be able to make tough decisions, because that's why either they were appointed or elected to that position. We need not the money or the threats from those who want to push their agenda or their candidates. We need to be able to make sure that that's not a deterrent. At the same time, I don't believe that either of those candidates actually truly won, and that is my belief. That's my opinion. And if you use common sense, then you will understand why. Because if we're campaigning and we're putting in all the work, and I have the crowds that's roaring and everywhere, and then all of a sudden I never see another candidate, and they're hiding in the back and they're running through bathrooms, but yet and still they beat the candidate that's not the best populist candidate, but the actual candidate that's best for the position. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's why we need common sense candidates to come back in and make central decisions.
Thank you. And then same question to you, Ms. Jones. Why have these court cases failed to prove widespread fraud?
Basically, from what I have been reading and looking at, is they dismissed the cases not based on the evidence. They dismissed the cases because they don't want to touch a hot potato.
Okay, thank you. And then Mr. Robinson, same question to you.
Yeah, the reason I can say no is that I feel that there's so many issues with our elections that you can't really determine who won, especially in 2020 with the results of the audit. I think the one glaring thing that the audit did show that everyone chose to ignore is that we can't say with certainty who actually won that. So I can't even say that I believe one candidate won over the other. I think there were so many issues with the election that it leaves room for question as to certainty of, who actually won. There's a lot of different flaws in our elections here. The voter rolls, I'm sorry, I'm looking down because I have notes here. They're inaccurate. They're running on antiquated software. There's people. We found voters that are over 120 years old that are still active voters on the voter rolls. We've seen that there's been cases where federal laws and state and local laws are not being followed through our elections. For example, there was thousands of people, I think up to about 9,000 is what I heard, that were disenfranchised during the 22 election because of negligence by the election department. And the ERIC and Avid system have been known to cause issues with the people going on to register their vehicle, and they have a summer home in a different county, and they re-register their vehicle, and then they go to vote and find out that they got re-registered to that other county that they only summer in, that they don't actually live in. So those are different issues that we have to, as a state legislature, try to figure out how we can fix those problems so that we can be comfortable and know that whatever outcome of the election is, that we know that it was fair and free, and that even if we lose, that we know we lost fair and square.
All right, thank you for that response. Moving on to other election-related questions. Do you believe Arizonans should be required to show a photo ID to vote, even when dropping off a mail-in ballot? And let's start with you, Mr. Griffin.
Yes, absolutely.
And
there are several either smaller countries or other countries that request ID. I can't go into a store, even as old as I am, and purchase an alcoholic beverage without the person actually IDing them, because that's by law. So when you're making the decision to choose a candidate, as well as local, state, or federal, or president, you should show an identification, because that needs to show that you are the particular person that's voting. Because we know that there have been a lot of schemes and a lot of people that's been on the roll that have voted that are either died or either not citizens of the state or should not have voted in any capacity.
And then Mr. Robinson, same question to you.
Yeah, I think elections, voting as a citizen, that is our most basic civic duty. And I think if we as citizens want to demand that our elections are secure and safe and fair, then we should be willing to show an ID in order to vote. I think that's the least that we can offer up as citizens to try to help secure our elections and make sure that voting is free, fair, and accurate. So yes, we should have to show ID to vote.
And then Ms. Jones.
Yes, I do believe in showing ID to vote. You hear people on the other side saying that it's going to disenfranchise people of a certain race or ethnicity. And it really doesn't, because they all have to have an ID to go to the doctor, to go to the bank, to buy alcohol, to buy cigarettes. So they've already got ID. So I don't see how the opposition party thinks that it's going to disenfranchise voters.
All right, thank you. And moving on to voting by mail, Arizona has been at the forefront of voting by mail for decades. Do you support voting by mail as it exists today in the state? And if not, what reforms would you like to see enacted? And we'll go back to you, Ms. Jones.
Voting by mail, maybe only for if you're going to be out of town and not able to vote, you might be able to do an emergency vote by mail. But for everybody in the state, no, because I've seen too many signatures that don't match on the envelopes compared to their signature on their voter registration forms. And we've seen 20% rates of where envelopes and signatures have been approved when you can clearly look at it and tell that that is not the individual's signature. So no, I do not believe in voting by mail for the whole state.
Thank you. And then to you, Mr. Griffin.
Yes, I like the voting by mail, but I think that voting by mail should have some type of identification process along with it. Like when you submit your ballot, either submit some type of ID, like ID me, they make you take some type of pictures or they make you take a screenshot. Just something should be on file to let them know that you're the person who's actually mailing in that ballot. That will prevent some of the fraudulent ballots and some of the harvesting of people who just gathering ballots, just putting X or different signatures and sending them in, because once the ballot is separated from an envelope, you can't go back.
And then Mr. Robinson, what, if any, changes to vote by mail would you like to see in the state?
I would like to see voting by mail taken back to what it originally was sold to us as, and it was supposed to be something that was done only under particular circumstances, and it wasn't supposed to be widespread and everyone can just vote by mail willy-nilly without any kind of reason for it, because both parties, if you look through history, have acknowledged that voting by mail makes our elections insecure. It allows a lot of opportunity for, bad actors to insert illegal or fraudulent votes into the system. And that's something that we have to be mindful. We have to take that very seriously. Elections, especially for the state legislature, this is our constitutional job and authority to oversee elections and to make sure that they're being taken place in a safe and secure manner. So voting by mail should be dialed back, and it should be, you should have to have a reason to have to vote by mail. Otherwise, most people I know are proud to go stand in a line and cast their ballot like everyone else on election day.
And then a follow-up for all of you on this, another just yes or no. Have you ever voted by mail before in this state? So let's go back in the same order, Ms. Jones.
Yes, I did. But the last couple of elections, I actually went in person and voted.
Okay. And same to you, Mr. Griffin.
I've never voted by mail, but I've requested a mail-in ballot this time, just in case that there may be some shenanigans on election day. I want to make sure I bank my vote.
Gotcha. And then Mr. Robinson.
I did sign up to receive a ballot. So I received the ballot because I want to look at the ballot. I want to look at my candidates. I want to research everybody. But then I also go in and I vote in person. So I don't actually use my mail-in ballot. I just use it for reference.
Gotcha. And then my last question for you for now on elections is we've talked about a lot of the issues you've taken with elections here. Some of these claims have been contested by election officials. Should there be consequences for individuals or elected officials who promote unfounded claims of election fraud that have been proven to be untrue in court? And if so, what should they be? And we'll start with you, Mr. Griffin.
First of all, there has to be, just for me providing an accusation of election fraud, if I have some evidence or there's evidentiary requests for somebody to observe a particular election or a particular election site, I don't think that you should be punished for actually making an accusation or inquiry if it's a legitimate inquiry. I think that'll be a misuse of the justice system. However, if you are using the court system as a weapon and then found that it's unfounded, then there should be some consequences for wasting the court's time as well as abuses of power.
Okay. And then Mr. Robinson, same question.
I'm sorry, can you restate the question for me?
Yeah, it was should there be consequences for individuals or elected officials who promote unfounded claims of election fraud, that have been proven to be untrue in court?
That's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, if someone is knowingly making false claims for whatever reason, then that's not good. It shouldn't be allowed. But at the same time, it kind of blurs into free speech. But if it's elected officials doing this, if they are making knowingly making false claims while they're in their official duties, then I mean, yeah, I think there are steps that the rest of the legislature can take to do something about that if any one member is participating in something like that. But it is kind of a slippery slope, though. I don't want to infringe on people's freedom of speech, and and I think a lot of even the false claims maybe are out of a confusion of a lot of different aspects of the elections that our current elected officials don't like to address directly when people bring up concerns or ask questions, especially from, like, say, the Republicans. They're hit with being ridiculed and gaslit about issues and made fun of, rather than just addressing their concerns directly and putting them at ease if it's something that is a non-issue.
Thank you. All right, we will move off of the elections topic and on to immigration. The current Republican legislature referred Prop 314 to the ballot, which would, if passed, do an array of things, including allowing local sheriffs, local law enforcement to enforce immigration law if someone crosses the border outside of a legal port of entry. Do you support that measure? And what other measures would you like to see the legislature take to address border security and immigration? And we'll go back and start with you, Mr. Robinson.
I'd like to see the state legislature take the safety of our citizens and the security of our borders a little more seriously. I'd like to see. I personally would love to, if I am elected, be very heavily involved in making sure that our borders can be secure, that we can monitor who's coming into our state. And the biggest concerns for me is the humanitarian crisis that's taking place at the border. There's so many people being victimized because of a porous border. And, and I also want to stop the flow of drugs. The fentanyl crisis that's taking place in our state is astounding. And we're losing huge chunks of our young generations to drugs. Babies are, crawling across the carpet and getting a hold of something, and all you have to do is touch it, and you can overdose. We've seen videos of police on stops where they touch something, and all of a sudden they need medical intervention because they're overdosing on a drug that they didn't even realize that they were touching. These things are dangers that our citizens are having to face because of not regulating the border properly or responsibly in order to secure the safety of the children and the citizens of our state. And I think that's something we need to take a lot more seriously and start fixing these issues immediately.
And to put a finer point on it, do you support Prop 314 that will be on the ballot?
I think I do support most of the measures in Prop 314. Yes.
Thank you. And we'll go to Ms. Jones. Do you support Prop 314, and what other border security measures would you like to see implemented?
I definitely support it. I've heard people say that we shouldn't support it because it's going to be profiling people. Because I think most of them come from South America and stuff, but when you've got people coming from 190 some odd countries, you've got East Europeans, you've got Asians, you've got, South Americans, you've got Africans. You can't profile when you've got that many different nationalities coming in. You're just trying to stop the illegals. And technically, we already have laws on the books that if somebody wants to get asylum in our nation, when they leave their home country, the first country they come to that has an American consulate, they're supposed to go to that consulate to apply for asylum and stay in that country until their case is heard.
Thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Griffin.
Yeah, I support Proposition 314. If it's going to allow our law enforcement to be the first line of defense on our border, since the federal agencies won't do it, I absolutely support that. I'm all about deporting all the criminal aliens immediately, the mass deportation. I'm all for that. I'm for the savior of our community. I do not want Arizona or any of our districts to be like Aurora, Colorado, where everybody's turning a blind head to what we can actually see. Everybody wants you to believe what your eyes are seeing. Don't believe it. But no, you have to be real with yourself and open your eyes and be in touch with reality. This is an invasion that's going on our border, and we need law enforcement, no matter what, to go down there and stop it. And I would push for funding to fund more law enforcement agencies and deputize more people, because we need, this is an all hands on deck situation. We need to stop it and nip it at the bud. Other than that, this will be overran, and all the people who don't want guns, you'll be begging us pro 2A people to come save you. So yes, I'm for it.
Thank you. And going to another measure that will be on the ballot, the Arizona Abortion Access Initiative, which would legalize abortion past the current 15-week mark and allow abortions up until viability or to protect the health or the life of the mother. Do you support that measure? And if not, in what situations, if any, do you believe that abortion should be legal? And we'll start with you, Mr. Robinson.
So I'd have to say no, I do not support allowing abortion. So I feel like we need to go remember where this legalization of abortion started with. It originally was supposed to be rare, safe, and legal. Well, since it was enacted, it's no longer rare. It's debatably safe, and it, in my mind, shouldn't be legal in every case. Only about 3% of abortions, and that's a very conservative figure, are being done out of medical necessity, which means about 97% of abortions are being done as a form of birth control or out of convenience. And I think as a society, it's something we need to really rethink, how we look at the value of life and how we look at the most innocent life that there is, that we need to protect, and we need to really pay attention to how we value that life and how we look at moving forward with this abortion debate. I think we need to come to a more common sense and constitutional based place where we can have this discussion and really look at if this is something that we're okay with. At 15 weeks, a child has a heartbeat, it has feelings, it has a nervous system, and it can think. This is what we're actually facing at that point. And so, you know, it's to me, it's difficult to think that it would be okay to push past that point. And I don't think this is actually as big of an issue for our district as people are making it out to be. I think people are more concerned about the economy. I think they're more concerned about making money and feeding the children that they have right now. And maybe if we can fix the economy, then people won't have to look at abortion as a way to keep them from having to be spread even more thin by raising other children, you know? So I think it's something we need to discuss more as a community.
Okay. Thank you. And then to you, Mr. Griffin, same question. Do you support the Abortion Access Initiative? And if not, in what, if any, cases do you think abortion should be legal?
I've been very clear on my stance. I'm pro-life with certain exceptions to safeguard the child, rape or incest, or to safeguard the mother's health. That's a decision that most mothers have to make, and it's a very personal, delicate decision. However, in my district, that's not the major issue that my constituents are worried about. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about the education of their children, and they're worried about affordable housing. So those are the issues that I'm really willing to deal with at this moment.
Okay. And same question to you, Ms. Jones.
This proposition shouldn't even be on our ballot. The state already has a nice law that the electorates passed back in April and May, up to 15 weeks, longer after that if there's a major medical problem. So this Prop 139 is a total non-starter. It goes way too far. It's taken the word physician and doctor out of the precinct. It all goes almost all the way up to infanticide. It's just too far, it's too much, and it needs to be voted down.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Griffin mentioned education, so I'm going to move over there. We already heard from Ms. Jones on this a little bit, but I wanted to give you all a chance to respond about how you feel about Arizona's school voucher program, also called the Empowerment Scholarship Account program, that was expanded to all students recently. Do you support that expansion to all students? And if so, how do you explain the overwhelming vote 4 years ago in which voters rejected a similar expansion? And we'll start with you, Mr. Griffin.
Sure. I support the expansion. I'm pro ESA. I'm pro the school choice. I think because of most voters voted down 4 years ago, it's usually because of miseducation and misinformation. And see, it's a money thing. And what it is it's the taxpayers' money. And if the taxpayers understood that instead of giving me $10, I can give you a better education for $5. Would you be willing to do that? Of course, it's common sense. I'm saving $5 and I'm getting better. So I support that. And the fact that you opened it up to everyone, it should make it a really competitive educational system. And when the federal government finally gets rid of the Department of Education and it comes back to the states, that's when the real conversation will go on, because now all the public schools will have to be competitive to be able to compete with these ones that's accepting these vouchers and providing a better education.
Thank you. And we'll go to you, Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, I'm supportive. I'm supportive of school choice. I think parents should be given the opportunity to send their children to a better school if their child is not, getting an adequate education. And I think, just like Mr. Griffin said, competition is the key. The more we allow schools to have to compete, the more they're going to provide a better product, being education to our children. And, they're going to up their game so that they get the money for that student and the funding in order to, compete in the school environment for our kids. And everyone benefits from that type of scenario. The kids get a better education. The children know that their children are being educated better and taken care of better, and the schools get the funding for providing a better service. So I think that's a win-win scenario.
And Ms. Jones, you had shared your personal experience with the program, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to answer this question again about your support for the ESA program.
If it's half as the cost of a public school education and the kids are getting a better education, I'm definitely for ESA. It is stupid to throw good money after bad if the public school system is not teaching the kids to the best of their abilities. To teach to the lowest member of the class and let the higher learning students sit there and fail because they're totally bored is stupid, it's ridiculous, and each child should be learning at their potential.
One of the problems facing Arizona schools is we see teachers either leaving Arizona or leaving the profession altogether. Do you have any ideas for legislation that you think could attract teachers or convince them to stay? And we'll start again with you, Ms. Jones.
It is up to the school boards to set the salaries for their school district. So if the teachers are not getting raises, they need to go to their school board and find out where the money's going.
Mr. Griffin?
What I would do is very interesting. You asked that question because I've always thought about what would I do to be able to maintain teachers as well, and what I would think I would do is I would get the teachers as while they're in the educational process when they're in the school to become teachers. And if we're going to fund their education, I would make it so they have maybe a 2 or 3 year covenant not to compete, in which they based on the funding of their education, in return, they work in a particular school. And if they have to work in a particular school for a certain amount of time, then it creates a certain tenure. And if the minimum is 4 years, at least they'll be able to have some type of relationship with a child for 4 years instead of the child not knowing if he's going to come next week and have another alternative teacher, or if this teacher had a breakdown because of some other situation she had to leave. If we have that there where we're actually funding the students and then they're reciprocating it by teaching in there, then Arizona will have all the best teachers because you alleviate that burden of debt as well as fund the teachers, and the taxes will be a win-win for everybody because now the students will be getting good, wholesome teachers that was trained here and then they educate here instead of us training them and then they go off to teach somewhere else.
Thank you. And Mr. Robinson, same question to you. How would you keep teachers here, attract teachers to Arizona?
I think Mr. Griffin had some really good ideas there, and I think there's some other similar things that we can do, some incentives and maybe some different ways that we can approach this situation to attract teachers to Arizona, but not only attract them, but retain the ones that do go to schooling here, and try to keep them here for at least a certain amount of time so that they can help with our education system, and the kids can have that stability of knowing that they have the same teacher for at least a full year before they get someone new. It's not something that I've actually put a whole lot of thought into, but I am very open to different ideas, and I would love to discuss this with other like-minded colleagues and see if we can come up with some really good ideas on how to fix the situation.
Thank you. And I believe some of those points that Mr. Griffin made are included in the Arizona Teachers Academy that was started a few years back. Moving on, I wanted to touch on another topic. Mr. Robinson, and I think a few of you others have discussed the economy and how important that is to your community to build up the local economy. A big part of that is obviously having the infrastructure in place to have businesses come in and create those jobs. So what infrastructure project in your district, if any, is there that you would fight for if you got down to the legislature and you had a say in that budget appropriation process? We'll go back to you, Mr. Robinson.
I think it's a really good question. I would like to start by helping the local mom and pop businesses as much as possible. That's the backbone of our community, is small, privately owned businesses. And I'd like to give them tax breaks if we can. There should be incentives that we can provide as a state for local owned businesses. And on top of that, we've got Westgate, we've got these other, big corporations that are coming in, and there is room for a lot of them. And I think we should give some incentives for bigger companies to come in, which will provide more jobs, which will help boost the living economy for the district, bringing more money into the district, some more entertainment, some more manufacturing jobs, some good backbone, salt of the earth type work that people can really make a good living and afford to live with their families and pay their bills. That would be really helpful for our district. I think that's the biggest concern that we have, is bringing more money into the district and making it so that we can be competitive and self-sustaining as a community.
Thank you. And Ms. Jones, same question to you. What infrastructure projects would you advocate for funding down at the legislature if you're elected?
Personally, I get tired of people talking about the big corporations and capitalism. the backbone of our country was built by entrepreneurs, people that started their own little businesses. They grew them, they hired more people, which put more economy out in the system. When you can grow a business and have disposable income to make it grow and hire more people, that gives you a bigger tax base right there. Trying to tax companies more to get money, all it does is hurt them. It takes away their disposable income, and all they do is turn around and they charge the consumer more money. So there has to be some way to come to a medium ground to where entrepreneurs and small businesses have a leg up and can compete with some of the bigger companies.
Thank you. And Mr. Griffin, same question to you. What sort of infrastructure projects would you advocate for?
Well, in our district, we are a thriving district, and there's plenty infrastructure and plenty businesses and buildings going up. In one particular, we have a big resort up there, the Divide Resort. And what I would like to do is bridge some of the small businesses with the large businesses so they can have some type of big brother, little brother relationship in which you as the bigger company utilize the services of the smaller company. In doing that, the smaller company then reciprocate by patronizing the bigger company. So we will circulate that dollar within our community. So I will fight for both the big businesses as well as the large businesses, but I would like them to be able to understand the shared revenue process that together we achieve more. So I'll make it a team process.
Thank you. And going kind of hand in hand with building the economy, childcare is obviously a huge thing. This kind of goes back into the education part of it. Childcare and preschool costs are unaffordable for many families and inaccessible for many Arizonans. Do you support any sort of legislation to help families afford that childcare so they can go to their job or build their small business or what have you? We'll start with you, Ms. Jones.
Funny question, because I wrote about that when I took my economy class clear back in the 80s. Large companies give their employees benefits. I think one of the benefits that large companies should do is they should probably have an on-site daycare for families that have small children, so that if something comes up during the day where the child gets sick, the parent can go down and check on them. And this is a benefit that does not come out of the employee's pocket, so that it helps the income.
And same question to you, Mr. Robinson.
Can you please rephrase that question for me?
Yeah, do you support providing some sort of childcare or preschool assistance for families, for Arizona families who find childcare and preschool unaffordable?
And you mean through taxpayer funds, right?
Through the state, yes.
So I think that would be a decision for the taxpayers to make. But, you know, there's so many things that we need to do for our society, for the people that are having a hard time. And that's something that I would actually consider, but I would have to look closely at that because, you know, my kids are all grown. I have grandkids now, so I don't know what childcare costs these days. I'm sure it is a major concern because it was a concern when I was a young father with kids, and it was difficult back then too. Yeah, I would have to look into this situation a little bit closer to make sure that I understood all of the variables to see what would be appropriate for the state to actually do with taxpayer money to try to help out families that need and deserve, that are actually trying to work and need the child care in order to, you know, go to work and provide for their family. So
Thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Griffin.
That's very interesting because it would have to have certain, I think you have to understand the circumstances that permeate the mother to be in that position that require that extra assistance. And then it would have to be if the taxpayers wanted to fund that. If the taxpayers wanted to fund it, I would try to probably add some type of option in there with the recipient who's receiving the taxpayer's fund that you kind of reciprocate regardless of the service or the business that you in some capacity in a volunteer setting to probably justify that. So say, for instance, if you're a nurse and we're giving you child care money for assistance, then you have a nursing assistance, then maybe we can have some of these elderly people or maybe some of these elderly indigent people that just may have need nursing assistance. Maybe you volunteer one day to provide services to the indigent, then yes, I would be more willing to help you use the taxpayers' money to help you with your child care because it's a trade-off. We're helping each other.
All right, thank you. Well, those are all the questions we have the time for. So now it's time for our closing statements. So we are going to go in reverse order of the opening statements and start with Mr. Robinson. You have 1 minute.
Okay. I love my district. I've gotten to know quite a few people in my district, and we are a very friendly community. And everybody I meet, even if we disagree on certain things, the one thing that we can all agree on is that we love our community and we love our children, and we just want to earn a living and live comfortably and happy and not be bothered by the government. And so, I would love to have the opportunity to represent this community, Legislative District 22, in the state Senate, so that I can help to fix some of these laws that are actually inadvertently hurting members of our community, and to help strengthen laws that will make things safer for our children and for our community as a whole.
Thank you. And then next we'll go to Ms. Jones.
Like I said, I moved here in 2013. I love where I live. We have a very diverse community. My community has all different kind of ethnic groups in it. We have a very diverse community as far as the entertainment system, going from Westgate and the football stadium down to entertainment venue on 83rd and down to the raceway in the southern area. And our area is just very busy, very diverse, and I would love to very much be able to represent the constituents of this district.
Thank you. And then your closing statement, Mr. Griffin.
First, Wayne, I want to thank you for inviting us for this debate. I really wish our opponents were here. That way our constituents will have something that they compare and contrast to. But since they don't, then it's evidence that I am the choice. And once I'm elected, I will represent everyone, Democrat or Republican, equally, because the policies that are implemented now, they affect us equally. So because of our ideology differences, don't let that be a reason why you shouldn't vote for me if you're a Democrat. If you want safer Arizona, you want a better, prosperous District 22, then I am your man, regardless of the R&D. And for the Republicans, we need to make sure we vote down ballot so we can take control over this and make Arizona great again. In doing so, we'll make Arizona great again by electing our new president, 47th President Donald J. Trump.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This concludes our debate. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 5th general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. And in a few moments, we'll be right back for our Legislative District 18 debate. Thank you. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, my name is Wayne Shutsky. I'm a political reporter with KJZZ, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor of the event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter to them, and vote informed. All registered voters can vote in the general election, which will be held on November 5th. The voter registration deadline is October 7th, and early voting begins on October 9th. Voters who are watching this debate live can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com, by texting 408-840-8350, or by calling 480-937-1253. We may not get to all the audience questions, but we will do our best. So now we will hear from candidates in Tucson's Legislative District 18 who are running for the House of Representatives. Senator Priya Sundaresan is running unopposed in the Arizona Senate. This debate is scheduled to conclude at 8 p.m. Candidates, you will each have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents, and if you feel the need to respond to someone's comments after they conclude speaking, you may do so. I may limit those responses for time management, and we remind the candidates to remain respectful, courteous, and professional. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. In the House, voters get to vote for 2 candidates. Your candidates tonight are Democratic Representative Nancy Gutierrez, Democratic Representative Christopher Mathis, and Republican candidate Leonard Rosenblum. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, starting for opening comments, and closing comments will go in reverse order. So, without further ado, let's go to the opening remarks. Representative Gutierrez, will you start those opening remarks, please?
Sure. Thank you so much, Wayne. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Gutierrez, and I serve as the minority whip in our state House of Representatives. And I'm very proud of being elected to representative in 2022 and then becoming part of leadership last year, voted by my colleagues. I serve on the Education Committee, and I'm ranking member on the Appropriations Committee. And during my time in office, I also have served on the most committees out of anyone in the House because I have stepped up and been substituted in on many occasions. I am a public school teacher. I teach here in Tucson, and I've been teaching school since 1994 in Arizona and other states, but at Tucson High since 2013. I've raised my 2 daughters here with my husband, Andy. We moved here in 2007, back to Arizona in 2007. And I want to be sure that Arizona is a place that my kids and then their kids are able to raise a family. I ran in the first place, and I'm continuing to run to protect and save public education, to protect our right to our own healthcare decisions, and to make sure we pass gun sense legislation. And because we've had another school shooting today where 4 people were killed, that is very much on my mind tonight. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Representative Mathis.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you to Clean Elections and to everybody tuning in tonight, and also to the other participants in the debate. My name is Chris Mathis. I am the one of the state representatives from LD18. I've been in the legislature since 2021. I serve on a few committees in the legislature. I serve on the environmental committee, which is all called NRU. I serve on the Health and Human Services. I serve in the Rules Committee, and I serve on the Ethics Committee. By way of background, I am a lawyer. Have done have an estate planning and an elder law practice. I also teach at the University of Arizona in healthcare law and policy, and I've done some other policy work in other capacities throughout my career. I would love to have your vote to come back to the legislature for another term. Having been there now for a few years, I really appreciate the benefit of experience and relationships, and I hope to build on that next term. Thank you.
Thank you. And with our last opening statement, let's go to Mr. Rosenblum.
I'd like to thank Clean Elections for hosting this debate. I'm Len Rosenblum. I'm happily married 20 years. I have 2 children, ages 18 and 13, both of them educated in the public schools. After graduating University of Buffalo with a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering, and then followed on with a Master of Science in Computer Science, I've been an engineer, a systems and software engineer for the last 38 years. But 27 years ago, I relocated from Long Island, New York to the Tucson area, actually this area here in LD18. I'm community focused, and I have been an emergency medical technician and a Little League coach. I currently hold the CCW permit, a ham radio operator license, and a notary public commission. I'm currently HOA treasurer and CPR certified. I'm running for State House to do essentially two things. One is to give back to the community based on my experiences, and the other is to provide voters a fiscal conservative and right-leaning candidate.
Thank you. So we have a competitive debate here. I wanted to go through a few topics that have typically divided the Democratic and Republican caucuses down at the legislature. First, I wanted to ask you about Arizona School Voucher Program, also called the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program. Do you support the recent expansion of ESAs to all Arizona students? And I'll start with you, Mr. Rosenblum.
Well, the program was expanded last year, and the programs had significant participation, much more than expected. So the people have spoken, the people like the program. Unfortunately, initial data, even after excluding startup costs, seems to show financially it's not sustainable. However, the tax credits that have been in place for years have withstood the test of time. I oppose raising taxes, and so I seek to create some alternative methods to still provide freedom to parents to have their children educated, but yet be financially sustainable.
Thank you. And then to you, Mr. Mathis, obviously the Democratic caucus has been opposed to this universal expansion, but do you think ESAs should they have been expanded in any way, or would you vote to eliminate the program altogether if Democrats took control of the majority in the legislature?
See, no and yes. Going back to the original purpose, I do think that when conceptually, when it was proposed, I think there could be a rationale if you have a situation where maybe there's a public school district that doesn't offer special needs services or something like that. So I think there could be a very limited situation, but we've got this situation now where we're essentially subsidizing affluent folks to send kids to private school. And we've had a chronically underfunded public school system in Arizona for decades. And this has also blown a $1 billion hole in our budget, and there's no funding mechanism to address that. So I think it's a lousy idea, and I'd be happy to vote to repeal it.
Thank you. And Representative Gutierrez, same question to you.
Yes, I adamantly oppose these universal vouchers because they are handouts for the wealthy. Over 75% of the people who are using vouchers are people who have never had their students in public schools, meaning they have always paid the private school tuition. And so that's why the program has grown so quickly, because every single person in our state who has paid for private school tuition is now eligible to get $10,000 to $40,000 for their student. This is draining our budget. Like Mr. Mathis said, it's almost $1 billion program that does not have a funding mechanism. I would not vote to repeal the entire program. I would absolutely vote to repeal the universal part of this. I do know, as a public school teacher, I do know there is a certain group of students with special needs who try the public schools and are not able to have their needs met. I definitely think those kids deserve the best education they can get. And that part of the voucher program was working. And I want to continue that. The thing is, when we expanded it universally, those kids and those families are saying they're at the back of the line and they're not even able to get what they need for their special needs children.
Thank you. Moving on to another issue that divided the legislature this year. We've got the Arizona for Abortion Access Initiative going before voters. Do you support that measure and that would legalize abortion past the current 15-week mark and allow abortions up until the point of viability to protect the health of the mother? Representative Gutierrez.
Yes, thank you. I absolutely support the initiative. I got signatures for the initiative, and we in the House and Senate in the Democratic caucus worked very, very hard to repeal the absolute ban on abortion, which we were successful at with a couple of our Republican colleagues. I truly believe that the decision to terminate a pregnancy is up to the person who is pregnant. And the initiative states that it's up to viability. So after viability, it's, that's a different question. Roe was overturned, and that was also about fetal viability. I wholeheartedly support this initiative in Arizona.
Thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Mathis.
Yeah, I agree with Rep. Gutierrez. I wholeheartedly support it. I've worked to get it on the ballot, and we'll work to pass it. Really, what it's doing is codifying the Roe versus Wade decision, which was a right that people had in the United States for 50 years. That decision overturning Roe, the Dobbs decision, should not have been decided that way, but it was, and so we're in this environment. Again, all that we're doing is passing an initiative to restore reproductive rights that people in this country had for 50 years.
Thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Rosenblum. Do you support that initiative? If not, did you support the 15-week law that is currently the law of the land, the territorial era law, or some other regulation on abortion?
So the current law was established essentially as a compromise 2 years ago. I oppose relaxing any term limits from that law. However, the law could use some clarifications to not eliminate, but mitigate legislating from the bench. I do think the proposition will let the people speak. I do represent the people, and they will speak on the proposition. We should note that the proposition is quite liberal. For example, it allows a 17-year-old to have an invasive operation without parents' consent. And compare that to my son, who went for a filling. After I gave verbal consent to the dentist, my son then drove over to the dentist the following week, and I had to give another written consent, which consent for a filling compared to no consent for an invasive operation. I think some problems exist with the proposition.
All right, thank you. And then I'll move to the last initiative.
Can I just go back
if
to
you'd
that?
like to make a response?
Sorry,
yes, Representative Gutierrez.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
Thank you. I just want to
30 seconds, please.
Thank you. Want to clarify that women right now who are pregnant are waiting outside of emergency rooms, bleeding, and having to wait to see if they're septic enough to be treated. So people are being put in very unhealthy positions just to get basic care. And I'm not sure that this initiative would allow a 17-year-old who is technically a minor. I'd have to look at that. I have not heard that, and I don't know that that's true. Maybe Mr. Mathis knows that that's true, but I do know, because I've heard from emergency room doctors, that they are scared to treat people who are pregnant with ectopic pregnancies, sepsis, and they're going to die if we don't do something about it.
Right.
And Wayne, I saw your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And if I just wanted to amplify the point that Representative Gutierrez makes. One of the vital things about one of the key things about this AAA initiative is that it will prevent the state from penalizing anybody who assists. And that is a huge problem that we have right now, both in Arizona and nationwide, is you have healthcare professionals who are scared they're going to get thrown in jail if they deliver healthcare to folks. And that's just untenable.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Rosenblum, if you'd like to have an additional comment, that I'll let you make that right now.
So as I mentioned earlier, additional clarifications are useful or even necessary to further define the existing law as far as what women's health care and really means. I do support health care. And so I don't want to minimize that. And that's essentially what we just heard from the other two candidates.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to the last initiative I'll ask you about for a while. This is Proposition 314, which was sent to the ballot by Republican lawmakers. It would do an array of things, including allow local police, sheriffs to enforce immigration law, essentially by making arrests for people who cross the border outside of a legal port of entry. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Rosenblum, if you were in the legislature, would you have voted to send that to the ballot, and do you support the measure?
We have a crisis. We have a crisis at the border. We have unvetted people, essentially criminals, coming into the country. We have human trafficking, drug smuggling. That has to stop. We have to protect the safety of our residents. If the U.S. Border Patrol is having difficulty doing it, I do support Arizona assisting the Border Patrol, perhaps in employing successful measures that Texas has taken to secure our border.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Representative Mathis. Obviously, Democrats voted against sending this to the ballot. What, if any, other measures would you like to see that you think would be more effective at addressing the border crisis?
Well, I'd like to see a federal comprehensive immigration reform bill, the one that was proposed and was getting ready to pass until the Republican presidential nominee would have called everybody and said, "Hey, this could hurt me if we pass it." And this and one of the reasons that I answer it that way is because this is an area that is federally preempted, and it is a federal border, and it's sort of black letter constitutional law that this is federally preempted. We've seen this before in Arizona with SB 1070. It was, in addition to being producing an environment of fear and being deeply offensive to a number of our fellow citizens and to me, it is something, again, that is just not an area that we can legislate statewide. Also, statewide, we have a rule that is called the single subject rule, and this initiative has a bunch of different subjects. Somehow, it was able to get on the ballot, so that was unfortunate.
Thank you. And Representative Gutierrez, same question to you. What would you like to see done about the border crisis?
Thank you. I agree with everything Representative Mathis just said. This law, if it passes, which I don't think it will, but it would bring us back to SB 1070, the Show Me Your Papers law, which is inherently racist. It is definitely unconstitutional. In the languaging, it talks about a proposition and law in Texas. And this law only happens if the Texas law actually happens. I don't think that Arizona should be creating laws based on other laws in other states that are in litigation right now for being unconstitutional. I think it's ridiculous. This was vetoed by the governor. It will cost Arizona billions of dollars in revenue. It will scare our residents. During the 1070 days, my father-in-law told my husband, who is Mexican, that he should carry his birth certificate in his glove compartment because he was afraid that his son and himself were going to get pulled over for being brown, because that happened continually. And he wanted to make sure that not only did he have his license, but he had his birth certificate. It is inherently bad for Arizona. It's a bad look. And I agree that this is a federal problem, and there was legislation that would have passed had it not been for the interference of the Republican presidential candidate. And I think that that is a sad day in our country when legislation doesn't pass because it would hurt someone's chance of becoming president.
Thank you. I want to move on to elections. I'm going to start it with what I said is maybe a not so simple yes or no for that I did with the last candidates in our last debate. So first off, do you agree that President Joe Biden won in the 2020 election in Arizona and that Governor Katie Hobbs won her election in 2022? Representative Gutierrez, over to you.
Absolutely, yes. Clean and fair election.
Representative Mathis?
Yes and yes.
And Mr. Rosenblum?
I don't know the answer. I'm an engineer. I look at the data, and the data is on the face.
So what would you say to the fact that none of the court cases that have tried to prove widespread fraud affected those elections none of those have been successful in court?
Widespread and just bad elections are different. So widespread, that's the data, fine. But what we have to look at are rules that changed. You're going back to 2020, which is a COVID year where there were adjustments made last minute during the election season. People were not educated, not people, but election officials were not educated on these rapidly changing protocols. And so I think as a result, there were some ballots that should not have been cast, especially provisional ballots may have been accepted that should have been rejected. But because of the essential disarray during the COVID years, it went through.
With all due respect, there was never any proof of that. I mean, audit upon audit upon audit upon audit never showed any proof of that whatsoever.
Would you like to respond, Mr. Rosenblum, since she addressed you directly?
I'm not saying there was proof. Proof is for a question. Was there a problem that was addressed to show proof? I'm simply stating that by changing rules midstream during the election season is bound to show some problems. We see that everywhere in engineering as well as in politics, and people not being properly educated, there will be errors.
I'll have one follow-up on that, and then I don't want to get us too derailed, but do you have any specific counties, specific areas where you've seen this disarray that you're talking about?
Not in 2020.
Okay. All right, well, moving on, I have more questions about election law in Arizona. I know the methods by which Arizonans vote has been a topic of debate amongst legislators. So do you believe that Arizonans should be required to show a photo ID to vote even when dropping off a mail-in ballot? And I'll start with you, Mr. Rosenblum.
A mail-in ballot to be U.S. mailed. So I'm not sure what the benefit is of showing an ID for an envelope that may not have a return address label on it. I do support showing ID to cast a ballot and to get a ballot. The ID could be a photo ID. Today, that's what we accept. But going further, when we modernize our voting system, perhaps a fingerprint would be the identification. And everybody comes to the voting booth with a fingerprint.
Thank you. And Representative Gutierrez, do you support, sorry, continue.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to show an ID when dropping off a ballot because you have to show ID and prove your citizenship when you register to vote.
And Representative Mathis.
No, voting is a right, and it's the right that unlocks all other rights. We should be making it easier to vote, not harder.
And then Arizona's been on the forefront of voting by mail for decades. Do you support voting by mail as it exists today? If not, are there any reforms you'd like to see to the way Arizonans vote by mail? And I'll go back to you, Representative Mathis.
I do support vote by mail. I think we are a national model and have been for quite some time, and we should be proud of that.
Thank you. Representative Gutierrez?
I ditto. Totally agree with Representative Mathis. We are a shining star in the country for secure voting by mail.
Thank you. And Mr. Rosenblum.
The voting by mail is an acceptable standard today. I did mention earlier I'd like to see the voting process modernized. I mentioned an example, fingerprinting. Currently, Pima County does do an excellent job allowing someone to track their ballot through the system. I've tested it.
Thank you. And then going back to the discussion about election results in previous elections, do you think there should be consequences for individuals or elected officials who promote unfounded claims of election fraud if it's proven in court that those were untrue? And I'll go back to you, Mr. Rosenblum.
No, not on the face. On the face, people should be, or officials should be able to ask for clarifications and say we may have a problem here. Let's evaluate it. They should not be penalized for that. However, abuse of power should not be tolerated from any elected official.
Thank you. And Representative Gutierrez?
I think that what we saw in previous elections in Arizona in attempts to change the electorate and be fake electors, yes, they should absolutely be prosecuted, which our Attorney General Mays is prosecuting that case right now. And if found guilty, I think they should go to jail.
Thank you. And Representative Mathis?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think any kind of fraud should be prosecuted, and certainly fraudulent statements about elections should be as well. So I just, that seems pretty clear to me that the answer is yes to that.
Thank you. I want to move on to another issue that is extremely important to everyone who lives in Arizona, which is water. Given that our water supply from the Colorado River has been curtailed in recent years, where do you think the state could find more water? What policies do you support to either augment, conserve the state's water supply? And I will go back to you, Representative Mathis.
Well, I've had an opportunity to do a fair bit of work in this area as the ranking member on the NRU committee, and also having been a member of the legislature in 2022 when we were able to pass the expanded WIFA legislation that appropriated hundreds of millions of dollars to both conservation and augmentation. The conservation fund was so successful and has funded so many projects that we're actually out of money. That was $200 million, but that I think gives you a sense of the appetite for that and the potential of conservation. And I think we need to take a look at some of those, the augmentation dollars, the long-term fund that we set up, and try to convert some of those dollars to conservation. So I think we need to look at both. I introduced legislation this year that was co-sponsored by our seatmate, Senator Sundaration, to integrate the findings of the Governor's Water Policy Council with respect to coming up with a third entity in addition to irrigation, non-expansion areas, and AMAs per the 1980 Groundwater Management Act that would be better suited to conserving water in our rural settings. So that's something we've been negotiating on actively since January, and have made as much progress as has been made since the Groundwater Management Act was passed. And lastly, we're very fortunate in Arizona to have an excellent negotiating team on the Colorado River, headed by Tom Bashonsky, who is the director of the Department of Water Resources. So we need to be looking at all of it, and we're working very hard in a bipartisan way, I would add, to do everything we can.
You just stole two of my follow-up questions, so I'll move to Mr. Rosenblum. Same question: how can Arizona either augment or conserve its water supply?
So I agree that water is a limited resource here in the desert. Conservation is the natural first method to go. How do we conserve? Certainly what Representative Mathis mentioned are ways. I'd like to augment what he said by educating the public, not just K through 12 students, but the public in general, to conserve, encourage them to conserve, perhaps even motivate them financially to conserve water. We should also subsidize or create some grants for our hydrologists in our universities to try to create ideas, come up with concepts for water generation. That's long-term planning, but I believe long-term planning is necessary here.
Thank you. And same question to you, Representative Gutierrez.
Representative Mathis is definitely the expert in water since he is ranking on that committee, but I do agree that we need groundwater management and we need it regulated. We also need to make sure that large corporations are not coming in and able to buy our water at a very low price and overuse it. We should not be selling our water to foreign countries to use for pennies on the dollar either. And the good news is that our state universities do have those partnerships already. I know that U of A works with a company in Israel. We got to visit this company and hear a talk from their person who works with the U of A to learn how to conserve the most amount of water and feed water the most amount of crops. So those are in place right now. And I think our public universities are such a great resource in that for our states and among the best top minds, which is another reason why we should fully fund them.
Thank you. And before I move to the next one, we did have a question come in from a viewer, question for Mr. Rosenblum on one of your answers on elections. The viewer would like you to explain how your support for less government comports with fingerprinting at polling stations to vote, if you could kind of make sense of how those two ideas play together.
Well, fingerprinting, I suggested as an idea, as part of a way to modernize our voting system, because everyone has a fingerprint. Sometimes people forget their government photo ID. So I just made a suggestion on how we could solve that problem.
Thank you. Now I want to move on to another issue in addition to water that is of import to just about every Arizona, which is housing affordability. I know our two incumbent representatives here have dealt with this issue a lot at the legislature. It's an issue that hasn't just divided Republicans and Democrats, but sometimes divides Republicans and Democrats and Democrats. So I want to know what ideas you have to help Arizonans address the housing affordability crisis, either ideas that have been proposed and not passed at the legislature or new ideas that you'd like to see get some airtime down there. And I'll start with you, Representative Gutierrez.
Okay, thank you. Yes, housing is a difficult problem, but it's one that needs to be looked at. I think the biggest issue we have in the state legislature with housing is our preemptions to our cities and towns. We have so many preemptions that cities and towns are not allowed to make the best decisions for their communities. And we have vastly different communities. I can tell you that Scottsdale is very different than Tucson, is very different than Casa Grande and Flagstaff and Snowflake, Arizona. So I believe that it's best for cities and towns to make those decisions. But among that, I mean, I do think that there should be a cap on how much a landlord can raise a rent. And because we do not have a cap in Arizona. So we're seeing that landlords are raising 20, 30, 40% a year. And I think that's wrong. So that's something that I would support. And then we're also seeing that multifamily homes can really be a great way to get more people housed, especially if they are along a route of public transportation. And I know that Tucson has tried to do that while still protecting our historic districts that make Tucson and very different than Maricopa County. So I definitely respect that. And that's why I think it's mostly best left to cities and towns.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenblum, same question. What solutions would you like to see on housing?
Well, I agree that as a state, we should really motivate the local areas, which would be the counties and cities, towns, to find locations where we could have high density housing, which could be purchased, such as condominiums, high density housing, condos, tend to be lower cost than single family residents. And giving that area to choose from to the county, that would still maintain housing values for the people that live in the county who prefer that suburban type sprawl without the high density. I do want to make a point that's slightly adjacent to this, and that's squatter rights. I do oppose squatter rights. I also encourage free enterprise, and being a landlord is a business, and the business should be able to be run to make a profit.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll go to you, Representative Mathis.
I agree with everything that Representative Gutierrez was saying about the trick in the legislature has been trying to balance preemption with getting a sound statewide policy. We're lucky in Southern Arizona because the city of Tucson is on the cutting edge a lot of this as far as trying to produce affordable housing. Something that actually I think a number of members of the legislature have experienced in Phoenix is basically price gouging with corporate apartment houses that are kind of going up. It looks like somebody planted magic beans along, Central and the streets downtown up there. There are algorithms that are being used that are very hard to understand. And I think this points up the issue, a broader issue that we have in Arizona, where our landlord-tenant laws are basically landlord laws. They're not landlord-tenant laws as exist elsewhere in the country. So I think that, especially if we're in a position to take the majority, this is something that we need to take a look at. Also, I'd like to mention the Housing Trust Fund, which we were able to fund with about $50 million this year, but last year we're able to fund with $150 million, which is the largest contribution to that's been made, I think, in Arizona history. So those are just a few of the tools that we need to be using to decrease housing costs, which the more you look at that issue, the more daunting they are, both with respect to single family homes, but almost especially with respect to rental prices throughout the state.
And a follow-up for all of you on this. What's your approach to addressing an issue like housing or water that requires, bipartisan cooperation in such a staunchly divided legislature? I mean, we've even seen some of that legislation that had bipartisan support go to the governor and get vetoed. So what's your approach to kind of bringing that coalition together to see legislation like this come to fruition? And I'll go back to you, Representative Mathis.
Well, I think our system is founded on this notion of working together to find compromise, to pass laws that benefit the citizens of the state. And the only way to do that is that. And so I have, and I know Representative Gutierrez has made a real effort to not just work with our Republican colleagues, which of course we do. And we actually, I think there's a bit of a misconception. Most of the work that we do, even on issues and in the legislature and voting on bills, is actually very cordial and very collegial. We don't agree on a lot of stuff. There actually is much more of an environment of trying to work together than you might think. Also, getting to know people outside of the work setting is very effective, and we've tried to do that. And I think that's the only way to do it on something like this water legislation that we've been working on. We've Senator Ashen and I and the governor's staff, and the three Republican members, Senator Kerr, Representative Griffin, and Representative Dunn, we've been meeting together since early February on almost a weekly basis. We've taken a little time off in the summer, but I think we've really gotten to know each other and I think respect each other's points of view. And so that's really the way to do it. It's just kind of that blocking and tackling is the way to get it done, I think.
Okay, and Representative Gutierrez, same question. How do you approach reaching that bipartisan consensus?
Yeah, I think that Representative Mathis is absolutely correct. I tried to get to know folks on the other side of the aisle as a person. And, I am totally fine with not agreeing with everyone all the time, because I know that's how I grow as a person. And and it's good to learn different people's perspectives. The problem comes when there are these very divided issues like public education or like abortion. And what happens is in public education, I'll give you an example. We didn't have any, or I think two out of all of the bills that we saw in our education committee, two were from a Democrat. So, that's difficult when you have bills that you have vetted through stakeholders and the people you represent, and then you don't even get to have your bill brought up in committee. Only 7% of our Democratic bills were ever heard in committee. We are at 2931 in the legislature in the House. So we Representative Mathis and I represent all of LD18, not just Democrats. And so we really try to put bills forward that would benefit everyone in not just our districts, but in the state. But they're shut down very quickly. And oftentimes, if a Republican member tries to come to us and work with us, they are very in clear terms told, we are going to primary you out. You will not be returning. And that actually happened to Senator Bennett and to Representative Cook in this last primary season. So yes, we're willing to work across the aisle, but on the Republican side, there is a lot of bullying to their own members that they're not supposed to work with us. And it's a shame.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenblum, if elected, how would you approach kind of forging those relationships in order to build those bipartisan coalitions?
I too believe in compromise. We're all legislators. We have to work together. We're founded on compromise, just like marriage is compromise. You're not going to agree with two people, let alone 60 people. So that's really the way to go. I also come in with a two-part method. In addition to that horizontal compromise and work with the senators as well as the House members, I also support collaboration on the vertical side, collaborating with our federal officials as well as our county school board officials. For example, the school board funding, we get, public schools do get federal funds, so we should look and collaborate with our federal representatives, as well as expending the funds, which is done at the school board level. So I have a two-part method.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad a few of you brought up education because I wanted to move back there. I know we talked about ESAs, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about funding for public schools. So first of all, do you believe that Arizona's K-12 education system as a whole is adequately funded? And if not, how do you propose fixing that more or less? I know there's a Prop 123 extension that could be coming up, but there's other ideas on the table. So I'll go back to you, Mr. Rosenblum. Broad question, but I'll let you take it away.
As far as funding for education, every school district's a little different on what the necessary expenditures are. And so we have to take a step back and take more of a broad picture as to how Arizona does fund education. The formula right now is quite complicated. Perhaps simplifying it would make life a little easier, and we just take parts. So I can't say across the state if every school district, public school district, is adequately funded. Certainly some are, many are not. But we should first look at the administration and reduce some costs, possibly using economies of scale, use the same textbook as many other districts to reduce the costs. Then we could take a further look at adequate funding. So right now, I think whatever the funding level is per district, we have to take a better look to see if we can reduce the expenses.
Great. Thank you. Representative Gutierrez, I know you want to answer this one, so
I do.
Send it to you.
Thank you. Public schools are not adequately funded in Arizona. There was a huge cut in funding in 2008, and we have not yet got to the numbers that we were at in 2007. So we've never made up that loss. Arizona ranks about 49th in the nation for per pupil spending. Every single student in Arizona gets the same amount of money funded to their district. So every district in the state is funded based on their enrollment. And then some schools have opportunities to supplement that funding, PTOs and things like that. But no, we are not well funded. We cut education in this past budget, which is why I was a no on the budget, and it hurt my heart very deeply. So we need to raise our spending in public schools, which we can do if we lower it in vouchers. And the admin costs in school districts are not outrageous. They are very, very low. Because schools have had to cut their expenses every year. So, here's an example. I am looking for grants to buy yoga mats for my classroom because my physical education department budget is not large enough to buy them. So I have to go outside of the school to look for that money. That is shameful. Also, I think it would be really great if the superintendent of public instruction was helping our school districts manage these low budgets instead of using $10 million to promote vouchers that go to public schools and then not knowing that grants needed to be upped with the federal government. So our public schools just lost another $29 million because the ADE didn't know that they were lapsing. So there are a lot of issues, but it's not about the districts. It's about the state funding and the person in charge of that.
Thank you. I believe the U.S. Department of Education gave them the opportunity to apply for an extension.
I hope so. I don't think we've heard back whether, we're hoping.
Representative Mathis, same question to you. Are public schools adequately funded? If not, how would you address that?
Well, so public schools in Arizona have been intentionally, chronically underfunded for decades. And I know to many, I think probably most people in the state, it's a scandal. And it is something that has been, when I moved to Arizona 20 years ago, is one of the things that was most surprising to me, having grown up and been a product of public schools in Illinois and a number of members of my family teach in public schools. The idea that we would want to have the best public schools we could was a shared value. It was not a partisan value. And we're in a situation in Arizona where that is just not the case. And by the way, that's not the case even without this $1 billion voucher program. So, the way to address this is to better fund public schools. And that involves teacher pay, benefits, working conditions, all of it. And it's not hard. And this is something where we should not be complacent to be last or near last in the United States on. It's just, as I say, it's a scandal, and the way to fix it is to fix it directly with better funding.
Well, you both brought up the impact the ESA program has had on budgets overall. Superintendent Horn did come out and say that, I believe at the end of the last fiscal year, the overall education budget, which includes the voucher program, public schools, charters, I believe, was $4 million under budget. He said that proves that it didn't blow a hole in the budget. I wanted to see how that hits you and what your response is to that. And I'll go back to you, Representative Mathis.
Yeah, that's baloney.
Why is that not the right way to look at that? That $4 million surplus.
I just think that's, sophistry. That does not reflect my understanding of how the budget works. And I think you need to consider the source on that
one. Representative Gutierrez.
Yeah, it's a shell game that he's playing. There is no separate line item but in the budget for ESA vouchers. Everything is all together. And so the projections from the JLBC over projected the amount of students in public schools. And so that money was not really allocated, but projected. We didn't need that money. That doesn't mean we saved money. It means there were fewer kids there based on people moving into the state and things like that. So to say that the projection was off and that gave us savings, it doesn't work that way. That's not the way the budget works. And I don't even understand why he's trying to say that, especially when there's $29 million that schools are being pulled. And then in April, it was March or April, there was also Title I funding that was pulled from schools last minute with no communication. So if there's extra money there, I know every single public school in our state would love that money. But the fact is, it's not there. So it's not savings.
And Mr. Rosenblum, I know you're not as intimately involved in the budget process as these two have been out of the legislature, but I wanted to know if you'd like to respond to what Superintendent Horn said about, essentially that $4 million surplus showing that the education budget is okay.
Well, just from an engineering viewpoint, any piece of data could be misleading. Similar to statistics, we could give any type of statistic. The devil's in the details. Similar to advertising, you generally don't advertise everything and show your entire hand. So we have to dive deeper to see where this money is.
Thank you. All right, I've got one last question for you all before we go to closing arguments, and we only have a few minutes, so I'll ask you to keep it to a minute. It's a district-specific question. We talked a lot about budget cuts, but when you're down at the legislature, what infrastructure project or other sort of investment do you think is important to the voters in your district that you would advocate for with your voice during budget negotiations? And I'll go back to you, Mr. Rosenblum.
Roads. We haven't talked about roads. I believe Arizona should enhance the existing roads and be proactive to create new roads. I'm thinking specifically about the Interstate 11 going from Nogales up to Hoover Dam. That type of road, similar to say train tracks type of thing, would allow more development along the road, and that would be proactive. We do want some growth to bring more funding into the economy, and roads are one of them.
Thank you. And Representative Gutierrez, same question to you.
Well, in the budget that we did in 2022, it was for 23, we actually got money for bridges in Tucson that had never gotten money from the state budget before. So I do think that was important to have a voice in Southern Arizona asking for that. But as far as infrastructure, I would say infrastructure for clean energy is extremely important to the people of LD18. I would also say that the voters I talk to at the doors don't want money to go to a new interstate. Maybe we could improve I-10 because we drive that a lot, and when it goes down to 2 lanes, it is very difficult. But I think LD18 voters would really appreciate more clean energy infrastructure.
Thank you. And Representative Mathis, to you.
Yeah, I actually agree with much of what both my colleagues said there. I think that when Representative Gutierrez and I notice the need to widen I-10 on certainly a weekly, if not daily basis, and that is something that we thought we had achieved in 2022 in our budget under Governor Ducey. It was a bipartisan thing, and then we wound up having trouble with the federal government. We're still on that track. That's vital. I think even though that is, I guess, closer to the Gila River than Pima County, that does have an impact in Pima County. I think otherwise just regular road repair and maintenance is a big deal. And I think to the extent that the county can receive help from the state budget, that we ought to be looking at that.
Thank you. All right, that's all the time we have for questions, so we'll move to closing comments. You each have a minute for that, and we'll start with Mr. Rosenblum.
Well, my pleasure participating in today's debate. Thank you. When elected, I plan to use my engineering background for well thought out policies that are sustainable through our next generations. Uh, I'm a fiscal conservative, and I want to employ smart spending. I offer a right-leaning candidate to the ballot, and I represent my constituents, not any political party. So I'm Len Rosenblum, the logical choice. God bless Arizona.
Thank you. And your closing remarks, Representative Mathis.
Well, thank you, Wayne, and thank you to Clean Elections and to all the viewers, and also to my debate colleagues tonight. I would love to have the opportunity to continue to serve the people of LD18, build on the relationships that we have at the legislature, and also the knowledge that's been gained. That's something we haven't talked that much about, but it really is. It is such a process-driven job that the longer you're there and the more you pick up, really is very important. I want to continue to bring Southern Arizona values to Phoenix. That includes restoring reproductive rights, preserving our precious water resources, as we've discussed, fully funding public schools, as we've discussed, passing common sense gun safety laws, which Representative Gutierrez touched on at the beginning of the debate, which is especially poignant today, and protecting voting rights. So I appreciate everybody watching tonight, and I would appreciate your vote in November.
Thank you. And lastly, we'll go to Representative Gutierrez.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, to my colleagues on the call and everyone watching. It's truly an honor of a lifetime to be LD18's representative, and then also to serve on leadership. I am grateful for it every single day. And every single day since I've been elected, I've been working hard for the people of Arizona, meeting with constituents, meeting with groups, learning and listening, trying to listen more than I talk. I am here to do the work, and I've been doing it. And I have always wanted to be that teacher's voice in our state legislature, and I don't take it for granted at all. I do want to continue the fight for public education, for the right to abortion and making our own medical choices, and for gun sense legislation. I just, on a day like today, and I think on our last debate 2 years ago, there was a school shooting as well, and it just hurts me in my heart that we're still talking about this, and that Arizona has done nothing to stop it. So it would be my honor, and I humbly ask for your vote to continue this work and be your voice in the state legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this concludes our debate. To our candidates, thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank you all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 5th general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. And yeah, thank you and have a good night.